Imagine pouring your heart, your life, into building a family legacy, only for your son's new wife to drag you to court, demanding it all for her kids. She thought she was entitled to everything but what the judge said next. It was a twist no one, especially not her, saw coming. Robert and we've always prided ourselves on being a real family. You know, close-knit, supportive. We poured our lives into raising our 3 kids, Mark, Emily, and Josh, teaching them about hard work, honesty, and that family bond above all else. And after all those years of saving, careful planning, and sacrifices, we built up a modest nest egg. Nothing extravagant, but it was ours, and it was meant for our children, and for our grandchildren. That's why what happened recently felt like such a betrayal. Mark, our eldest, he was married to Laura for a decade. They had 2 absolutely beautiful kids, Amy and Ben. Even after their divorce, which was mutual, by the way, we kept a strong bond with Laura. She was, and still is, a wonderful mother, and honestly, she remained a respectful ex-daughter-in-law. I loved Laura like my own daughter, truly. And Mark? He was such a devoted father. We really admired how he and Laura always put their kids first, even through the divorce. It was important for us that Laura stayed part of our family, and she did. Then, about 3 years ago, Mark met Sarah. She was a colleague. Their romance? It was a whirlwind, caught us completely off guard. But Mark seemed happy, genuinely happy, so we opened our arms and welcomed her into our lives. Now, Sarah, she'd been married 3 times before, and she came with 6 children from those marriages, ranging from 4 to 16. We knew this would be a major adjustment for Mark, for all of us, but we hoped he'd found his happiness. We tried our absolute best to embrace Sarah and her kids. Our motto has always been the more, the merrier. So, we included them in everything: family gatherings, holidays, outings. Robert and we love taking our grandkids to Disneyland, and having Sarah's kids join us? It felt even more special, even more fun. We even helped Mark and Sarah out financially when they needed a bigger home, a place that could fit everyone. Their blended family just needed more space, and we were more than happy to help with the down payment. We'd always prioritized our children's well-being, their families. This was no different. We truly thought it was a gesture of love, of support, something that would strengthen our family ties and give them a comfortable home. But, you know, that goodwill we extended? It started to take a really unsettling turn. Sarah, who had been so grateful at first, began to show this growing curiosity about our financial situation. At first, it was subtle. A few questions about our retirement plans, future expenses. Robert and we just figured she was interested, making sure we were prepared for our own future. Harmless, right? But then, her comments got sharper. More direct. She started making these passive-aggressive remarks, saying how all the grandchildren should be treated equally in our will. We tried to explain, calmly, that while we truly cared for her kids, our resources were limited. Our plan, our life's plan, had always been to leave our savings to our biological grandchildren. These conversations never went well, so eventually, we just avoided the topic altogether. It was easier, we thought. Things got even more complicated when we decided to update our will. We called a family meeting: Mark, Sarah, Emily, and Josh. We even wanted Laura, Mark's ex-wife, to be there because her children were involved. But Laura, bless her heart, she said Sarah might not like seeing her husband's ex at a family gathering. And we respected that. Not everyone's a fan of their husband's ex, fair enough. So, we disclosed our plans. Our estate would be divided equally among our children, with specific funds set aside for the education and future of Mark, Emily, and Josh's kids. Everyone seemed genuinely happy with this. Emily even told us not to worry about her, but you know, that's a parent's duty. Then came Sarah's question, the one I dreaded. By Mark's kids, you also mean my 6 children, right? I felt my stomach drop. I calmly, so calmly, told her we really wished we could provide for them, but like we'd said before, our main priority was our biological children and grandchildren. And then she exploded. Accusations of favoritism, discrimination. She even said we were punishing her children for things beyond their control. Mark tried to calm her, but you could see it in his eyes. He was torn, caught between his new wife and understanding our perspective. The meeting ended on such a sour note. Sarah stormed out, Mark trailing behind her, trying to soothe her rage. It was awful. The tension didn't stop there. Over the next few weeks, Sarah's attitude got even more confrontational. She started spreading rumors within the family, accusing us of being greedy, unfair. She even began telling her own children that we didn't see them as part of the family, poisoning their minds. It created such a toxic environment, straining our relationships with Mark and even with Emily and Josh. We tried to find a solution, truly. We suggested Mark and Sarah make separate financial provisions for her children. We even offered to help them set up savings accounts. But Sarah was relentless. She insisted that all children, biological or not, deserved an equal share of our estate. It was insane. And then, the situation escalated to a level we never expected. One evening, we got a court summons. Sarah had actually sued us. She was demanding that her children be included in our inheritance plans, claiming that by excluding them, we were causing them emotional distress and creating an unfair family dynamic. We were absolutely devastated. I mean, who does that? We never, ever imagined our own daughter-in-law would take such extreme measures. The legal battle that followed, it was stressful, to say the least. It drained us, emotionally and financially. Sarah's legal team argued that her children had a right to be considered equal heirs, that they were now part of the family. They painted us as outdated, discriminatory, uncaring. It was humiliating, exhausting. We were in shock, so deeply hurt. This wasn't what Robert and I had planned for our retirement years. Never in our wildest dreams did we think we'd be dragged to court by our own daughter-in-law over our personal financial decisions. We had no choice but to hire a lawyer to defend ourselves. To make matters worse, the lawsuit completely divided our extended family. Some relatives, especially those who had only heard Sarah's twisted version of events, they sided with her. They truly believed we should be more inclusive. She'd made up so many stories, how ignorant we were, how we'd isolate her kids at family gatherings, make them sit in another room. It was all a lie. We treated those kids just like our own, included them in every activity. Honestly, if I'd heard that story from someone else, I probably would have been convinced I was pure evil. So I didn't blame our friends and family for believing her. But others, like Emily and Josh, they stood by us. They insisted we had every right to distribute our assets as we saw fit. Family gatherings became battlegrounds. The tension was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. Throughout the ordeal, we tried to maintain a relationship with all our grandchildren, including Sarah's kids. But it was clear Sarah had poisoned their minds against us. She'd cancel planned visits at the last minute, make excuses for why her children couldn't spend time with us, even accuse us of favoring Amy and Ben in front of the other kids. It was heartbreaking. Truly. Our lawyer, she was our rock through all of this. As she reviewed the evidence for Sarah's case, it initially felt like we were losing. Sarah had built this incredibly strong narrative, presenting herself as a victim of our supposed unfairness. For a while, it really seemed like the court was leaning in her direction, making us fear the worst. But we weren't giving up. Our lawyer decided to dig deeper into Sarah's past. She reached out to one of Sarah's ex-husbands, just to gather some background. What started as a simple check for Sarah's behavior during their relationship quickly turned into a major breakthrough. During the conversation with Sarah's ex, it was revealed he had been paying child support for 3 of Sarah's children. No one in the family knew about this. When the topic ever came up, Sarah would claim she hadn't received any support from any of her ex-husbands, that she alone raised her 6 kids. When we first heard that, we were surprised, but we applauded her courage. Now, we knew the truth. And while this was unexpected, it wasn't enough to cover the needs of all 6 of her kids, so our lawyer kept digging. To our absolute shock, it turned out Sarah had been receiving substantial child support payments from all 3 of her ex-husbands. She had never, ever mentioned this in court. The total amount from these payments was more than enough to provide for her 6 children. Yet Sarah had been pretending to be financially strapped, making it seem like she needed our inheritance and Mark's support. This discovery? It was a game changer. Our lawyer compiled all the evidence and presented it to the court. The revelation was explosive. Sarah had been hiding her financial situation, misleading the court, trying to manipulate us emotionally. The courtroom atmosphere shifted dramatically. The judge, he did not like this. Sarah's earlier claims of financial hardship were suddenly called into question. The judge's questions became sharp, demanding explanations for Sarah's failure to disclose her true financial status. Sarah struggled to defend her actions. Her facade of being a struggling single mother? It crumbled right there in front of us. The more the judge probed, the more apparent it became that Sarah had been blatantly dishonest. In the heat of the moment, her attempts to argue that the child support payments weren't enough fell completely flat. The judge's frustration with Sarah's lack of transparency was palpable, and her credibility was quickly diminishing. As Sarah's credibility unraveled, the courtroom was filled with whispers, shocked glances. The judge's final questions were particularly damning, challenging Sarah's integrity and intentions. The room was so tense. I could also tell that this was unexpected news for Mark. He was as surprised as we were when we found out, except it had to be more painful for him, knowing he'd stood up for his wife against his own family, only for her to have been hiding this crucial information all along. It must have been absolutely heartbreaking for him. In the end, the court ruled decisively in our favor. The judge upheld our right to distribute our assets as we saw fit. And then he ordered Sarah to compensate us for the emotional distress and legal fees we had incurred due to her frivolous lawsuit. She was also charged with a penalty for concealing her assets from the court. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. Sarah's face went white. Mark looked utterly defeated. As we were leaving the courthouse, Sarah actually approached us. Her entire demeanor had changed. She wasn't the aggressive, entitled woman who had dragged us through months of hell. Instead, she suddenly wanted to settle things. She suggested we should let go of all the misunderstandings and move forward as a family. She had all the kids with her, and she told us Mark and the kids would not be able to handle this sort of emotional distress. We were too stunned to respond. We just walked away. Now, we're left wondering where to go from here. While we felt liberated by the court's decision, our relationship with Mark was deeply, deeply strained. We worried about the long-term effects on our family dynamics. And Sarah's sudden change of heart? It felt completely insincere, especially after everything she put us through. Update 1. Mark's apology and Sarah's continued victimhood. The day after the verdict, Mark called us. He sounded absolutely exhausted, his voice heavy with something I hadn't heard in a long, long time. Regret. He asked if he could come over to talk, just him without Sarah. Robert and I agreed. We knew this conversation was long overdue. Mark arrived that evening, and honestly, the sight of him just broke our hearts. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His usually well-kept appearance was disheveled. As soon as he sat down in our living room, the weight of the past few months seemed to collapse on him. He broke down, sobbing into his hands. We just sat there, letting him get it all out. When he finally spoke, it was an outpouring of apologies. Mark admitted he had failed us. Failed to stand up to Sarah. Failed to protect us from the turmoil she had caused. And failed himself by letting things spiral so out of control. He revealed Sarah had been pressuring him for months to convince us to change our will. She'd spun the whole situation as fairness, repeatedly telling him her children deserved just as much as our biological grandchildren. When Mark tried to reason with her, pointing out it wasn't about fairness but the reality of our financial situation, Sarah became even more insistent. She even threatened to leave him if he didn't support her in the lawsuit. Mark was trapped, torn between his loyalty to his new wife and his love for his parents. He admitted that deep down, he knew Sarah's demands were unreasonable, but he felt utterly powerless to stop her. He was afraid of losing his marriage, and in his desperation, he let Sarah take the lead, even though he knew it was wrong. It was clear this whole situation had been eating away at him, and now, with the court's decision, the full weight of it had come crashing down. As Mark continued to talk, he revealed something even more concerning. This wasn't the first time Sarah had caused issues in their marriage. Apparently, she had a history of financial disputes with her ex-husbands and their families. Mark explained that when they first got together, he noticed a pattern. Sarah always seemed to be in the middle of some conflict, usually involving money. He'd brushed it off then, chalking it up to her difficult past, but now he realized it was a massive red flag he should have paid more attention to. We spent hours talking that night, with Mark opening up about his marriage, his fears, his regrets. Robert and I just listened, offering our love, our reassurance. We told him that while we couldn't change the past, we would support him, no matter what decisions he made about his marriage. We urged him to consider counseling, both individually and as a couple, to help him work through these issues. The next day, we got a call from Laura, Mark's first wife. She'd heard about the court case from Amy and Ben, who were understandably upset. Laura, who has always been such a steady presence in our lives, offered her support immediately. She thanked us for always being fair, loving grandparents to her children, and expressed her sadness over what had happened. Laura told us she'd spoken to Amy and Ben, reassuring them that they were loved, and this conflict didn't change how much we cared for them. Her kindness, her understanding, it was a balm to our weary hearts. As for Sarah, we haven't heard directly from her since the courthouse. But through the family grapevine, we learned she's been trying to garner sympathy, portraying herself as a victim of our cruelty. She's been spinning a tale about how we mistreated her and her children, using the court's verdict as evidence of our unfairness. Some relatives, especially those not privy to all the details, they've been swayed by her version. They actually see us as the villains. But thankfully, others have seen right through her act, recognizing it for what it is, a desperate attempt to shift blame and avoid responsibility. In the midst of all this, we've decided to focus on what matters most, healing our relationship with Mark and with his family, and maintaining strong bonds with all our grandchildren. The court's decision may have settled the legal matter, but the emotional wounds it left behind? Those will take time to heal. We've decided to seek family counseling, something we believe will help us navigate this complex, painful situation. It's not just about moving forward. It's about finding a way to rebuild the trust and love that has been damaged. For now, we're taking things one day at a time. There's still so much uncertainty about what the future holds, but we're determined to stay strong as a family. Update 2. Sarah's vicious escalation. CPS accusations. Just when I thought the dust was starting to settle, a new crisis emerged. One that shook us to our core and forced us to confront the possibility that this conflict with Sarah might be far from over. Yesterday morning, while Robert and I were babysitting Josh's kids, just going about our usual routine, we received an unexpected visit from Child Protective Services, CPS. The arrival of CPS at our doorstep was shocking, to say the least. We had no idea what could have prompted this visit. But the moment the CPS worker introduced herself and mentioned an anonymous report of emotional abuse and neglect of Sarah's children, it didn't take long for us to suspect who might be behind this. The worker explained they're required to investigate all reports, regardless of the source. She assured us it was just a routine inquiry, but the implications were terrifying. The idea that someone, almost certainly Sarah, had made such a serious, false accusation against us was both infuriating and deeply unsettling. She asked to speak with us individually, then conducted a thorough inspection of our home. Every room, every closet, every corner. Robert and I cooperated fully, explaining the entire situation, including the recent court case and the ongoing conflict with Sarah. We showed her the documentation, which clearly outlined the dispute and the court's ruling. As the visit continued, the CPS worker's initial formality softened. She seemed to understand this was more than just a family dispute. It was a case of malicious retribution. She reassured us that, based on her assessment, there was no evidence to support the claims. She thanked us for our cooperation and left, promising a written report in a few days. The whole experience left me shaken. We'd been through so much, but this felt like a new low. It's one thing to be dragged through the courts over money, but to be accused of harming children, especially children we tried our best to welcome into our family? It was devastating. Later that afternoon, we received a frantic call from Mark. He had just found out about the CPS visit and was horrified. Mark was in full-blown panic mode, his voice trembling. He confirmed our suspicions. Sarah was behind the report. According to Mark, when Sarah found out he had visited us alone the other night, she flew into a rage. She accused him of betraying her, and in her fury, she threatened to make us pay for what she perceived as a slight against her and her children. Mark was distraught. He told us Sarah had become increasingly erratic since the court verdict, lashing out at him and the kids, refusing to let go of her anger. She had been trying to manipulate the situation further, using every tactic she could think of to maintain control, even if it meant tearing the family apart. During our conversation, Mark revealed something even more concerning. He had been in contact with a divorce lawyer. This wasn't a decision he'd made lightly, but after everything, he realized Sarah's behavior was toxic. Not just to us, but to him and all the children involved. He was deeply worried about the impact this conflict was having on Amy and Ben, as well as Sarah's kids. Mark told us he'd been doing a lot of soul-searching, and he now saw Sarah's true colors more clearly than ever. The CPS incident? That was the final straw for him. He couldn't continue living in fear of what Sarah might do next. And he certainly couldn't allow her to keep using the children as pawns in her twisted game. We advised Mark to document everything, every incident, every conversation, every threat Sarah made. We emphasized the importance of prioritizing the well-being of all the children involved, urging him to take whatever steps necessary to protect them from this toxic fallout. As for us, we've taken additional precautions. We've installed security cameras around our property, just in case Sarah decides to escalate things further. The last thing we want is for this to spiral into something even more dangerous. We've also been keeping a close eye on our interactions with family, knowing that anything we say or do could potentially be twisted and used against us. The family remains divided over this whole mess, but the tide is slowly beginning to turn. More and more relatives are seeing Sarah's true colors. They're realizing this isn't just a misunderstood daughter-in-law trying to do right by her kids. This is something far more malicious. Sarah's actions have gone beyond what anyone could consider reasonable, and the lengths she's willing to go to get her way are becoming increasingly apparent. We're doing our best to stay calm, not to engage in any direct confrontation with Sarah, following our lawyer's advice. It's hard, especially when we see the toll this is taking on Mark and the children. But we know reacting impulsively would only play into Sarah's hands. Right now, we're focused on supporting Mark as he navigates this incredibly difficult situation. He's made it clear he wants out of this toxic marriage, but he's also worried about what that will mean for his stepchildren, who have already been through so much. Mark is a good man, and he's trying to do the right thing by everyone involved, even as his own world is falling apart. As for us, we're trying to keep our heads above water. This whole ordeal has been exhausting, and we're not sure what the future holds. But one thing is certain, we won't let Sarah's manipulations tear our family apart. We'll keep fighting, and we'll keep protecting the ones we love, no matter what. Update 3. The final dominoes fall. Finally, I can tell you there's some resolution, some clarity beginning to emerge. A few days ago, Mark made the agonizing decision to move out of the house he shared with Sarah. He's staying with a close friend, trying to figure out his next steps. This decision came after a series of absolutely shocking revelations about Sarah's continued manipulative behavior. Mark discovered Sarah had been secretly contacting his ex-wife Laura with these alarming, disgusting claims. She told Laura that Mark had been drinking heavily, that he'd become aggressive, even suggesting Laura shouldn't allow Amy and Ben near him for their own safety. Laura, to her immense credit, saw right through Sarah's lies and manipulation. She immediately informed Mark about Sarah's deceitful attempts to turn her against him. Laura's support has been unparalleled, a crucial anchor for Mark during this chaotic time. We are so grateful for her clarity and her strength. As if that wasn't enough, Sarah's lies didn't stop there. She reached out to Emily and Josh, further spreading chaos and discord. She told them that we didn't care about them or their children, and that everything was going to be given to Mark in the end. Apparently, Sarah had overheard a conversation between Mark and Robert during a family gathering, which she twisted to fit her deranged narrative. Emily and Josh, thankfully, saw through Sarah's erratic behavior immediately. They confronted her directly, and when Sarah realized her manipulation was completely failing, she abruptly ended the call. It just showed her desperation, her volatility. This latest betrayal was the absolute last straw for Mark. He has since filed for divorce from Sarah. He's seeking full custody of Amy and Ben, and he's working closely with his lawyer to address the false CPS report Sarah filed. The gravity of the situation has finally hit home for Mark, and he is absolutely determined to protect his children and ensure Sarah's attempts to manipulate and deceive are properly dealt with in court. And Sarah? Now facing the inevitable fallout from her failed schemes, she's attempted to contact us multiple times. She's left tearful voicemails, apologizing profusely, begging us to convince Mark to give her another chance. We have chosen not to respond to any of her overtures. Instead, we are meticulously keeping a record of all her communications for potential legal use to ensure we have a complete history of her attempts to mend fences in the wake of her spectacular manipulations. In the midst of all this turmoil, we've had the chance to spend some much-needed time with Amy and Ben. Sarah hadn't left them in peace either. Now, looking back, they recall so many incidents where Sarah made them feel left out. She would often compare Amy's achievements to her own daughters, and once even told them they were too reliant on their father. They are understandably shaken by everything that's happened, and we've done our best to reassure them of our unwavering love and support. We're working with Mark to ensure they have access to therapy to help them process and cope. Their emotional well-being is our top priority. Regarding Sarah's children, our concern for their well-being remains strong, despite everything. We don't want our kids to feel abandoned or rejected by the family they've been a part of for the past few years. Mark agrees with us and is exploring ways to maintain a relationship with them, potentially through supervised visitation, depending on the outcome of the divorce proceedings. We truly hope to find a way to continue being a positive presence in their lives. The extended family has largely rallied around us and Mark in recent days. Even those who initially sided with Sarah have reached out to apologize after learning the full extent of her actions and manipulations. We're slowly, carefully, rebuilding those relationships as trust and understanding are being reestablished. It's a long road, but we're hopeful that we can mend these familial bonds over time. Through this experience, we've learned several valuable lessons. While we don't regret our initial decision regarding our will, we've recognized that our communication about our intentions could have been clearer from the outset. In light of recent events, we've decided to set up a small trust specifically for Sarah's children's education, separate from our main will. While this trust isn't as substantial as what we set aside for the others, we hope it will provide some support and truly demonstrate that our issue was never with Sarah's children themselves. Looking ahead, our focus is squarely on healing as a family. We're continuing with family counseling to help navigate the complex emotions and dynamics that have surfaced. We're also taking proactive steps to legally protect ourselves from any further attempts by Sarah to cause trouble or disrupt our lives. Mark is making progress each day, though he has a challenging road ahead with the divorce and custody proceedings. We're optimistic about the future, and so grateful for the strength our family has shown in facing this crisis together. It's been a long, painful journey, but we're finally seeing the light. This whole ordeal has been a nightmare, a true test of our family's resolve. I can't help but wonder, what would you have done if your own daughter-in-law had dragged you through something like this? Have you ever had to fight for your family or your decisions in court? I really want to know your thoughts. Share them in the comments below.